Hello, everybody. Welcome to the video. Let's see. I would like to welcome you to Running Fate Game Prep and Analysis, hosted by the Polyhedral crew. Let me turn off my Twitch stream because I can hear myself. So let's see. Okay, so we're going to take that from the top. We're going to say welcome to Running Fate Game Prep and Analysis, hosted by Polyhedral Crew. I do this video every other Tuesday in between sessions in which we play Dresden Files Accelerated. Dresden Files Accelerated is a game by Evil Hat Productions. It is a Fate game. Fate is my very favorite game. I have a lot of fun running it, and so I was really happy and excited to start running a Fate game. As I do every 2 weeks, I kind of do an analysis of what happened previously and what's going to happen, and talk about all things Fate related, whatever strikes my fancy. I've got a little bit of a list off to the side. These are some of the things that I'd like to hit tonight, some of the points. If you're in the chat room, of course, please feel free to hit me up with some questions. I'm happy to interact with them. I've got a bunch of windows open here on my screen, so I'm looking forward to talking about role-playing stuff. So just to go over the topics that I'd like to talk about tonight, I'd like to talk about the last session a little bit, just in broad strokes, and then talk about a few things specifically. Specifically, I want to talk about building the library, which is the secret headquarters for everyone. I want to talk about the lip balm of glibness that I handed out, which was a magic item. Sorry about that. Let's see, I'd like to talk about Manananangagol, which I absolutely know that I mispronounced because there's an awful lot of N's and A's in there. I'd like to talk about that creature and how pretty cool it is, and how pretty cool we're going to try and make it for the next session. I'd like to talk about all of the characters because we're getting to know them, and I'd like to specifically talk about Evie because there's a little bit of some discussion that I have to have around that character, and then I'd like to just kind of like talk about what's coming up next in the campaign, just kind of talk about how we're bringing all of these things together. So I want to start by talking about the last session. I think that the last session, things were starting to gel really well. We made some choices behind the scenes, some technical choices, most notably being in our very first session, or session 0, character creation, and session 1, our first play session. We had our microphones muted when we weren't talking. That was to eliminate background noise and kind of like, everybody gets a turn and things like that. And one of the things that we noticed, specifically John pointed out whenever we did our post-game wrap-up, was that there really wasn't a whole lot of banter. Because if you want to make a smart-ass comment, you have to unmute fast enough to make sure that your smart-ass comment is funny and timely. There's nothing worse than a smart-ass joke like 2 minutes after the fact. So we decided in the last session, which was session 2, the second actual play session, that we were going to have open mics. And I will admit that I was a little bit concerned about this because I find background noise distracting. And it turned out it was perfect. It was fine. Everybody's microphone filtered out any potential background noise that they might have. If anybody had anything going on in the background that was loud, they were apparently smart enough to mute it. It worked out fantastic. It kept the banter going. It felt more like a real gaming session. And by real, I mean like an in-person gaming session. And so it was good. I feel like everybody is starting to fill out their characters a little bit better. I think that there's still going to be some exploring going on. I mean, part of playing a role-playing game is to explore the character and to see how that grows and how you kind of flesh out that character based on the choices that you make. But I think that this session 2, really kind of shined a light on that. Like, so Michel is, he is an envoy for the Earl King. He's new to town. He's kind of a little bit of an outsider. He wants to do a good job and he's earnest. He's not naive. That's not true, but he is, he's working his way through things. Like, he's competent at the things that he's competent with. And it's just the stuff that's not like fighting that he's figuring his way out. And so like his personality is starting to come through. Sorry, we've got a little bit of a cold going through our house. Our little 4-year-old disease vector brought it home from school with her, and so I'm fighting that off. So if I have to mute occasionally to cough, my apologies. So let's see. So then there was John's character, Hux. Hux is, I told John this, that he did a fantastic job role playing. And I think that I really got a good feel for Hux and his personality. I really liked the how Hux and Michelle related. The fact that Hux didn't like Michelle as soon as he found out that he was Fae. And I think that the fact that they're going to be working together almost kind of turns it into a buddy cop movie, which is pretty awesome. Then there was Ravi, played by Ryan, and I think that Ravi needs. I need to fan the embers there just a little bit. I think that I think Ryan's still figuring out how to play him, and I think that I've got to provide Ryan with some opportunities to make decisions to bring Ravi out of his shell, and so I'm going to be working on that. To help pull a little bit more out of it. Like, he's obviously, kind of a defender paladin sort of type, but I'd like to add some dimension to that and see some dimension grow. Again, this is just the second actual play session. I know sometimes whenever I play in campaigns, it can take me like 10 or 11 sessions to get a really good handle on the character. So none of this is meant as bad comments. It's just, part of the job of a GM. Some players find their characters fast, and some players find their characters slow. And as a GM, it's my job to help pull out those characters by providing them opportunities in the spotlight and decisions to make. It's a little bit of like a push-pull. It's kind of like making taffy. Lastly, Evie. I feel that so Mallory is a very strong role player, and I really like the character concept that she has for Evie. But I'm going to talk about Evie a little bit more later. I think that we've got a lot of good personality there. I just think again we've got to do a little bit of that taffy pull. So overall, I think that the characters came out well. I think that the plot itself didn't really move too much of the plot forward. Started introducing elements. We're still in kind of like pilot zone for a campaign. This is where we're figuring out, how people react to certain situations, how people interact, and so that can be it can be very interesting. It's a time of choices and when the molds are being put down. So the plot's going well, and I had a good time. Like, I think that's one of the most important things. I laughed a lot. I had a great time. There's a lot of smiling. There was a Dunkin' Donuts trip interlude, which I thought was just amazing. I love stuff like that in games. My games have a tendency to tend to feel a lot like the movie The Mummy. Not the recent one by Tom Cruise, because that was a disaster, but the Brendan Fraser version of The Mummy, which was amazing. And so, like, I have a tendency to run my games like that, where there's action and adventure and fun. And so, like, that's kind of like, that's one of my bars. So let's see. Let's move on to another topic that we've got listed here. The next one is library building. Okay. So library building. One of the first things that we did in the last session was that everyone went to the super secret headquarters that during session 0, we decided that we were going to create. Like, the players wanted to have a base of operations, and we talked about it being in a library and being tied to books and all of this stuff. But one thing that we didn't actually do during session 0, because we ran out of time, was actually fleshing it out. And so what I decided to do at the very beginning of the session was ask a series of questions to help flesh it out, because I was very interested to see what the players would come up with. And so let me move around a couple of my windows here, because I want to actually share with you what we kind of talked about whenever it came to that. So let's see. Let me show the side. Now I'm going to have to reassign to the correct window here. We'll do that. There we go. Excellent, excellent. Now, let's use some shortcuts. For those who are curious, I'm using the Ulysses from Mac app with the Firefox theme, the colorized theme here. And things of note, that's not it. Oh, goodness, I thought... Here we are. Event library. Excellent. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to resize this window a little bit to get it to fit a little bit more. And because I assume that you guys want bigger text, we'll do a little bit of bigger text there. So the the first thing that I did was I wrote down a series of questions for the players because I wanted to make sure that the players were going to well, first of all, that everyone contributed to the definition of the base. And so I wrote down a bunch of questions. The questions that I asked were, what does the secret door or entrance look like? How does it work? I figured this is an interesting thing. So that was my first question. My second question was, what is an interesting feature of the area? And of course, there's a giant typo in it. Usually these are private notes, so I don't worry about that. But sharing them here on Running Fate, we're going to find some typos. So, this question was kind of seeded by the idea of like, okay, so Batman's Batcave has like, trophies of things that he or villains that he's defeated, like the giant penny, the T-Rex, things like that. So the next question that I had was, what is a giant problem with the space? Because I wanted there to be a drawback. Like not necessarily like a trouble aspect, but I wanted there to be a drawback. I wanted like there's something wrong with the space, like like the Batcave. Maybe the Batcave it's a cave, so it's hard to maybe have electronics there or something. And then the last question that I have is, what is the living space like? Because everybody's going to be sort of living there, or at least like Evie is going to be living there, and so. So I wrote these 4 questions down, and I intentionally, during the process of asking these questions to the players, which you can see if you've seen session 2, I asked it one question at a time, and I let the players self-select who was going to answer. So I didn't assign them to anyone. We knew that Evie was going to be living there, so of course it was pretty funny that she actually answered the first question, and what does the living space look like, because she lives there, was answered by someone else. So we determined that the library was going to be hidden behind a section of the library called political ethics. No one goes there. And so I thought this was hilarious. And so it is definitely pretty awesome. So then what is an interesting feature of the area? Because it's so old, the electrical system is super old and ancient. There's like tungsten light bulbs. So like, like random power outages, things like that. I felt that this was super interesting. It can also be a drawback, but it's okay to have multiple drawbacks. That's part of what makes stories interesting sometimes. And then I asked about a giant problem, and someone said, hey, a lot of people have died in this library, and it is haunted/cursed. A lot of folks have died there. This is something that I didn't use in the moment because I hadn't processed it enough. Like my thoughts went immediately to Dennis from the TV show Angel from season 2. Yeah, okay. I watch a lot of Buffy and Angel. And so I was thinking about Dennis, but I'm thinking like, do I want the ghosts to be helpful? Do I want them to be a quote unquote character? Like how do I want to manage this? And I'm still not sure, honestly. And I'm probably going to punt it for a little bit, because something like that kind of deserves its own story element. And so I think I might want to tie that in somehow. But, and then the living space question was that there are 2 rooms. One is big and spacious with a computer desk, lots of books. The other one is a disaster of a mess. It's a giant like hoarder's, I'd say a hoarder's nightmare, but hoarders, I guess, dream of having a bunch of stuff. And so it ended up, that's how the library is. And I, of course, being the bad GM that I am, decided to say that there is no bathroom in the secret headquarters, that if they have to go to the bathroom, they've got to go out. The reason that I did this is 1, because I thought that it was funny, and 2, this creates a moment where there could be a problem. So if they're trying to remain hidden, there's a chance that they can be exposed because they've got to go to the bathroom. And so that helps generate it. So I felt that we like defined the library, and now I have to kind of take this and I'm going to write up some aspects based on this library. I will probably talk about that in the next Running Fate game, because I'm not sure that people want to watch me live write aspects. At least I'm not prepared to do that right now. So that's the library, and I thought that we built that pretty well. Let's see. The next thing I want to talk about is the lip balm of glibness. So I'm not in Fate. I'm not a big fan of handing out magical items. I don't like to do it a whole lot. The reason for that is that basically I believe that players are already telling me the interesting things that they want to do with their characters through aspects and stunts. I'm a very generous GM. I encourage my players to change aspects and stunts often, at least as often as it makes sense. We generally follow the the minor milestone rules, which is you can change any one aspect that isn't your high concept, and you can change one stunt, or you can buy a new stunt. And so I encourage my players quite often to be like, listen, you guys know you're going into the deep dark cave. Do you want to maybe load up a stunt that might be appropriate for that? Because there's nothing worse than sitting down to play a game and having dead abilities. If you're a mounted knight and you're going into like a dungeon crawl during a game, that it's horrible. It sucks. There's a reason why every mounted character is a halfling or a gnome in D&D, because they can get a medium-sized mount and go through the dungeons. If you play a human paladin, you have a mount and you take mounted combat, that lance is worthless whenever you go into the dungeon. So I really support like moving around of stuff. So as a result, I don't end up giving out a lot of gear or magical items. Whenever I do, they're typically single serving things. Just because I don't want them to be around for a while, and I also have them expire. So if I create something cool that that the players are like, oh, this is really cool, and then they sit on it for 5 or 6 sessions, that tells me that one of two things. One, I'm either not giving them the right opportunities to use this, which means that I'm failing as a GM. If I give them something cool, I have to give them a reason to use the cool thing. But if I'm giving them reasons and they're just abstaining and just kind of like hoarding this thing, then what I'll typically do is kind of tell the player, like, listen, couple more sessions, this is going to go away if you don't use it. And so what that does is that encourages the players to actually use the item or interesting thing. This is a trick that I used in 3.5 version of D&D a lot. I would reward players with small little abilities. But those abilities would have like a lifespan or a single use on them. And so it was a use it or lose it sort of situation because I didn't want them to stockpile things. So let's talk about that lip balm of glibness just a little bit. I am opening up the sheet, so let's go ahead and switch over to the side view. Excellent. So in session 1, Michelle, when going into the library base, called for backup. And basically just said, listen, I don't know what situation I'm going into, and so I'm going to call for backup. I actually think I compelled him to do that because I wanted to make his life more complicated. And so what I did was I had the Earl King's backup arrive. It's Olwen, an old military goblin with short cropped gray beard, and with several younger goblins with him. And so basically just kind of like sussed out the situation, took note of everything that's going on. I made one of the other jobs of Olwen to be a recruiter for the Earl King. So one of the main things that we've got going through this game is that there is the Discarded, which is a group of half-fae who seek revenge on their sire. Okay, Senator Middleton. And that's a major component of the plot that I'm putting together. And so I thought, like, well, let's kind of feed into that a little bit and have Olwen kind of try and recruit. And so we can tell more of that story. So Olwen, I had him kind of recognize Hux as a half-fae, which Hux does not like, and actually offered Hux a gift. And I thought, like, oh, this will be interesting. And the gift was, I call it lip balm of glibness. In fact, I think I may have mentioned the name outright in the game, but basically it was just a lip balm that would allow the user to put it on their lips. And whenever they for an entire scene, any action that involves talking has scale. So, like, for instance, if Hux is trying to talk his way past guards, if he's trying to command, like, an army of undead, if he's, like, whatever he's trying to do, he has scale for that entire scene. And I thought that this would be a very good, a very, like, potent, interesting magical item. The drawback to it is that when you use it, you mark 2 boxes of indebted to the Earl King. And so what this means is that if Hux uses it, then he's going to he'll have to burn some indebtedness to the Earl King, which will be interesting in trying to remove those indebted checkboxes. So basically what I was doing is kind of doing kind of like a temptation sort of thing for Hux. And so John grabbed onto it. He loved it, especially given that, like, because I phrased it that you can speak with the power of the Earl King, Hux is now lording this over Michelle. And so that buddy cop movie that's going is just kind of continuing and just, yeah, it's just amusing me a lot. So he has it, and that's pretty good. And that was a lot of fun. So let's see. Let's go back to our list. The next one, the Mananangul. So this was actually a monster that was submitted to the show via Twitter. This is back whenever I was starting to put everything back together. I actually couldn't find it before the show tonight. I'd love to post a link to it, or a link to the recommendation, and give credit to the person who gave it to me, because I really appreciate it. I love feedback. I love, like, people who are watching the show either live on Twitch or after the fact on Twitter, like, poster ideas, send in information. I love it. It helped. The human mind is the greatest, like, random generator ever. And so let's see. I am looking up the creature because I have. All right, so I've got the creature called up here. So what I actually think I want to do is call it up on Wikipedia so that you can see the creepiness that we saw. All right, so I'm going to switch to the side view. We will go over the mechanical creation as soon as here we are. Let me turn off Ulysses, turn on Chrome. There we go. So this is the creature. Let me just go ahead and make that a bit larger. So this creature, which is sometimes confused with the Wak Wak and the Aswang, is a vampire-like mythical creature of the Philippines, a malevolent, man-eating and blood-sucking monster or witch. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but right along the waist of that illustration, you can see that the top half has separated from the bottom half, which reminds me, of course, of the saucer section splitting in Next Generation. So in my head, I've actually referred to the monster as the saucer section in the base. And basically, like, as we, like, read along here, I started looking at it. It's very much vampire-ish. And let's see. The creature is said to favor preying on sleeping pregnant women and has an elongated proboscis-like tongue to suck out the hearts of fetuses. So I thought, like, this would be a creature that would be good to use on the show as a monster to help conduct a ritual. So in the last session, the very last thing that the players did was went to a hospital to try and find someone and actually encounter this creature, having completed a ritual that involved, like, they're not sure yet, but it does involve, like, an unborn child. And so I'm trying my best to make the show that we put on, like, PG-13, but unfortunately, like, sometimes you've got to go a little bit dark, so we're still feeling our way through the appropriate, grim kind of nature of things. Fortunately, it's just, it's based on how I describe it. But anyway, I found this creature super interesting and decided to put it together as an actual monster. And let me just go ahead. I'm going to switch back over to my app here. So here we go. So I've given it 2 aspects. It is a blood drinker and my body separates. I thought that those were 2 fairly good aspects. I kind of want to add a third because I feel that those are fairly descriptive. And I want to kind of add another one that maybe adds a little bit of flavor to the creature, like give it a little bit of motivation. Like that's the thing that this creature is kind of like lacking right now. Like I have it in the scene. I know how I'm using it. I know what I want it to do. I need to add a little bit of motivation, just a touch of motivation. So if anyone has any suggestions, please, you're welcome to post it into the chat. You're welcome to send me a message. That would be fantastic. So I did that. Then I decided that I didn't want the creature to be super, super tough. So I gave it an apex skill equal to the same as the players, which means it's not going to take very long for the players to take this out, especially given that it's Ravi and Hux dealing with the situation. But it has a +3 to haste and a +2 to guile and force. The legs have a +2 to force. So they're actually going to be like the way that I'm going to run it, because it's split at the end of the last scene, I'm going to run them as separate monsters, except they're going to have a unified stress track. So that means if the legs or the top take stress, then the whole creature takes stress. But I am going to modify the action economy by having the legs and the top, the legs and the torso have separate initiatives. And so what this is going to do is this is going to give me like a couple of different actions to keep it interesting, but it means that the monster will still go down pretty quickly. So this will up the challenge against the players, but not dramatically so. There is, I stole this straight from the vampires, this hungry box. There are 5 boxes of hungry. I'm still playing with like how I want to do stress boxes. I used to do like 5 of these bad boys to represent stress. But I found that doesn't work while I'm actually doing it in play. I find that if I do like this, and that represents that I've taken 3 stress in there, or checked off 3 of them, that works out better for like myself, like GMing. Because I actually use this particular document while I'm GMing. But anyway, you get +2 per box of hungry. Basically, these are kind of temporary boosts, and they can get replenished by making the victim take a condition representing physical harm. The physical harm is going to be like, it's got to be something that the creature's like drinking blood. Like the legs are not going to be able to do this. So 6 stress. Oh, wait, I gave the leg stress. Nope, don't want to do that. Sometimes I work on things over and over again and I don't delete things, but then whenever I get into play, I realize how I wanted to run them. This is part of like behind the scenes GMing, like a real live, like actually like in the middle of GMing kind of situation. The notes are fast and loose, if at all. And stuff that gets written up and published has to be tight because other people are using it to write from. But this is super loose. So basically 6 stress boxes, a single 4-point in peril, and then there's dead. Going back to the Wikipedia page, there's a specific concoction that kills this creature. Garlic herbs and a stingray tail. Interestingly enough, this particular creature was actually in or at least under the name Aswang, which sounds really dirty, but it's an actual name of a supernatural creature, was in a supernatural book. And Supernatural is one of my favorite shows. And so it was pretty interesting that like Sam and Dean actually took on this. I've not read the novel. I probably won't read the novel just because of time constraints. But yeah, so basically what's going to happen is they're going to take it out and they're going to notice that it's still basically kind of moving, and they're going to have to determine like, what do they want to do with that? And so that's going to be interesting. Like, do they choose to like basically try to end it? Do they try and chop it up and run away? Like what What are they going to do with it? And so that leads to learning more about the player characters. This is sort of like ghouls and Dresden Files in the novels. It's kind of hard to kill, but it's easier to take them out than to kill them. So you take them out, you run away, and generally you don't end up messing with them again. So one other thing I'm not going to talk about the rest of the scene because I actually am making the whole scene a little bit more complicated. But I wanted to talk about this particular creature because I thought it was fairly interesting. And again, it was user submitted, which I really appreciate. So let's go ahead and switch back here. We're almost done tonight. I think that tonight might be a short running fate. So I want to talk about Evie. Let's see. Mallory plays Evie, and Evie's character, if I can just go ahead and call Evie's character up. Let's see. This will probably be... I'm trying to find which one's going to be the best way to kind of show it on the screen. So let's see. Let's switch back to the side. Let's switch back to Chrome. Here we go. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to hide Hux's column, and we don't want to be distracted, so we're going to go ahead and hide that. So let's talk about Evie. So Evie, as played by Mallory, wants to be the person in the chair. This is someone who remotely assists and helps the rest of the team. This is, if you saw Spider-Man Homecoming, that was a big, or not a big, but a subplot in the movie. Well, I don't want to spoil anything because you might not have seen it. But anyway, it's a joke in Spider-Man Homecoming. It reminds me of the TV show Leverage. There was a character, the computer hacker, who was there and who was usually in the sidelines, but sometimes had to get involved into the thick of things. I don't know that Mallory's actually ever seen an episode of Leverage, so I'm going to kind of need to talk with her about what our options are, because if she persistently wants to be removed from the situation, that's going to make it very difficult to make it interesting. Her character already has a lot of knowledge and information, and so I don't want a situation where I have to come up with special threat for the remote person all the time, which makes it difficult. At the same time, I also want to afford her the possibility of playing a character like this. One of the things that I really like and enjoy about Fate is being able to play all sorts of different character types. And so this is a thing that we kind of need to figure out. Part of it is me as GM, and part of it is me talking with Mallory and saying, listen, sometimes Evie's gonna have to be involved. And so we'll kind of suss our way through that. I think that generally, her character is built pretty well. I like her aspects: unwilling founder of the nebulous organization, The Truth, disgusted by her hunger, never stops digging, no firewall can stop me, and broke ink addict. So what I need to start doing is figuring out ways to bring this about. Some of the things that I think about to get her into the action is that she's unable to do things remotely. For whatever reason, because she's a broke ink addict, the battery in her laptop is poor quality and ends up failing on her. Or the power the firewall that she's got to get through, requires her to be in the building instead of outside of the building. I've got to start thinking of things like this to help inform the game, to make sure that there's some push and pull. And Mallory is an excellent player, and so I know that if she decides to watch this, or after I talk to her, we're gonna modify that and make sure that we're getting everything that we want out of it. Because I mean, she's not going to have any fun if she's always on the sidelines not doing anything, and because that's going to be boring. So we need to make sure that we're balancing the concept that she has with the character with the story in the game. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and reveal the other player characters here back in that document. And then I'm going to go back to the full screen. So let's see. We have talked about a lot of things tonight. Now I want to talk a little bit about what's up next. To be entirely honest with you, I haven't given what's up next a whole lot of thought. I was away at a conference this weekend, and so a lot of my time was learning new technologies. I do web design and development, and so I was learning a lot of super awesome, cool things at Drupal Camp Pittsburgh, and it was awesome. And so whenever I wasn't learning stuff, I was sleeping or gaming with my friends in Pittsburgh. And so I haven't given a whole lot of thought to what happens next. But I do know that we need to re-involve the Denarians. So the players are very interested in the Denarians. They're not sure what's going on. They have this book, The Picatrix, which is apparently, as a book, there are 4 parts to it. And so I think that the players understand that, like, we've got a rod of 7 parts sort of situation going on, where it's like, all right, so there's a book in 4 parts. We got to get 4 parts, which may or may not prove to be true. But at least it gives them a path to sort of go on. And so I've got to start leading them on clues. Because if you remember from a previous version of Running Fate, one of the things that I wanted to do was that the Denarians were trying to collect up the Picatrix in order to use it to either stop or control something bad that's coming. And that's sort of the, And that's sort of the first plot that's going to reveal the bigger plot, which is that there's a bigger, badder evil going on in town than the Denarians, and so I want to kind of lead that through. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on next. I'm also going to. So one of the hard parts about being a GM hard parts for being a GM in general is making sure that all of the connections work out. And so one of the things that I'm having a hard time doing is bringing all of the connections of all of the aspects that we have in play right now and making them work together. It's not too terribly difficult, but I have to, because we're in the beginning part of the campaign, I have to lay a bunch of groundwork. Like, we don't know how the discarded and the truth get along. We don't know, do they get along? Do they not? Is it a case of, like, some do and some don't? And I don't know the answer to those questions. Sometimes it comes out in play. Like, there's no need for me to do 20 hours of world building before each session, but I do need to have a reasonable idea of how certain things are interconnected. And I actually came across an article. I follow Rob Donahue, who writes on his blog, The Walking Mind. Let me go ahead and switch to the side view here. He wrote an article that I actually thought was super cool and interesting. There's this diagram here. You can see that's got numbered 1, 2, 3, et cetera, and a bunch of lines that connect them. This is a game called the Glass Bead Game. Let me go ahead and increase the size here to make it a little bit more legible. It's called the Glass Bead Game. And it took a little bit of digging on his website to find out what that meant. But basically, what you do with the Glass Bead Game, sorry I'm moving it around a lot. I'm just kind of trying to look for highlights. But what the Glass Bead Game is that you lay down, in Fate, you would lay down various aspects here on these different numbers. And then what the game portion of, I'm sorry, I'm kind of skipping ahead here. I'm super excited to talk about this stuff, and sometimes I forget to put it together in a narrative. So the Glass Bead Game. The point of the Glass Bead Game is to make connections between different things. And what you do, you can see the grid here. The grid can be any kind of grid that you want. It can be flat, round, wide, tall. It can be shaped like Zion National Park. whatever it is, you write down a bunch of things where all those different numbered circles are. And the point of the game is for you and the other person that you're playing with is to make connections between these. So like between number 2 and number 8, you're going to write down all of the connections that you see between whatever's written on number 2 and whatever's written on number 8. And then what you do is you compare notes to see how many similarities you have, to see how many things that you've brought together. And what this is an enlightening game, an enlightening creativity exercise that allows you to see connections that maybe you didn't see before, to compare and contrast. So Rob's, let's see. One of the things, like for one of the touch points, he said, for example, let's use Superman. Pretty well known. Everybody kind of knows him. He's an alien. He's an icon of truth, justice, and the American way. Mild-mannered Clark Kent, nemesis of Lex Luthor. And basically, you can start writing down all these things about Superman. And then what you have is do the same thing for Batman. Okay. And you can write down all sorts of things because he's just as iconic. And then what you do is see if any of the items on your Batman list resonate with any of the Superman list. So what this means is that if you play this game using the aspects that you have going on in your Fate game, you can start to create connections between them. So this means that for example, we have a couple of aspects. Ooh, going the wrong way. We have, for instance, Hux has his toe in the Fey waters. And say we have to kind of connect it to Broke Ink Addict for Evie. Well, so, one of the first things I think of is like, okay, so maybe they both know a tattoo artist. Maybe there is a summer or winter Fey tattoo artist. Maybe Evie doesn't know they're a Fey, but Hux does, but they both know them. Let's see, another possible thing. Maybe there's a fence or a pawn shop that they both know and go to. So for instance, again, like Hux knows someone in the Fae who runs the shop, and Evie makes use of the shop. Let's see, what else could we do with Toe in the Fey Waters and Broke Ink Addict that isn't involving like buying a shop? Maybe, for instance, maybe Hux actually desires to get some tattoos made. Or maybe Hux knows of like warding tattoos. Like maybe he understands what the tattoos of St. Giles are. Maybe Evie had, in order to afford the tattoos, had to do something for a Fae, and as a result, it was something that maybe she didn't really like, and maybe it was something that goes against what Hux wants, or maybe it's something that goes with what Hux wants. And so, like, you can see just by this little small example with Toe in the Fey Waters and Broke Ink Addict, those two aspects, suddenly I'm starting to build up possibilities between those by playing this glass bead game. And so, yeah, if you don't already check out Rob Donahue's blog, I really suggest it. He writes such awesome things, and if you're curious about gaming systems, he writes reviews that are like thousands and thousands of pages. It's like he writes an ebook about a role-playing game. And he's a great guy too. I met him at Gen Con a couple of years ago. Fantastic person. So let's see. So that, I think that's going to wrap us up for the night. I really appreciate everyone who watched and everyone who is watching. I have a lot of fun doing these. I hope you have a lot of fun watching them. I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us here on Twitch. Every follow helps and every subscription helps. Reach out to us on Twitter. I love talking to people. I respond pretty quickly and often. So, and I am frequently in the Fate Reddit posting things. And helping give people advice. So again, thank you all for being here and watching this video. You guys have yourself a good night.